Where do you live here in St. George? Where do you live here in St. George?
At the Sunrise Village Townhomes down on 7th South and Main Street. Okay. Welcome back to A Story to Tell from the campus of Dixie State University. We're talking today to Ted Dodge. Ted, how are you?
Doing good.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, and what you're doing here in St. George.
Well, I grew up in Southern California. My mother passed away when I was a senior in high school in 1964, and I attended Brigham Young University. Went there for about 5.5 years and went into financial services 47 years ago, 48 now, just about the time I was getting ready to graduate from BYU. Had spent about 8 years in the grocery business in Southern California and there in Provo, Utah. At that time, the draft was using the lottery, and I had a very low number, so I made the decision to join the National Guard in Farmington, New Mexico, where my wife was from, and spent 6.5 years in the National Guard, went through Officer Candidate School in Santa Fe, New Mexico, 1 weekend a month for a year, and spent 6.5 years in the National Guard in 4 different states, New Mexico, Texas, California, and Utah. My financial service career moved us around quite a bit. We were in Salt Lake City and Texas, back in Southern California, Salt Lake City, and then up in Idaho.
What company did you work for?
Worked for a number of different companies. For a number of years I was the Western Regional Director for the Financial Services Division of the J.C. Company. Had responsibility for 14 Western states and had about 130 representatives that I worked with. Spent time with Beneficial Life Insurance Company, which is owned by the Mormon Church, has one stockholder, the current prophet. And a good part of my career was spent in southeastern Idaho building an organization for Beneficial Life. And in 9 years, we were very successful up there and placed over $1 billion of life insurance during that 9-year period. Moved back to Orem in 1990 and represented several companies, and about 7 or 8 years ago decided to slow down a little bit and move to St. George.
What made you choose St. George?
Well, I got tired of shoveling snow. Went out one day and slipped and fell and said, I've had enough of this. It was harder to adjust having grown up in Southern California because we did not do a lot of snow shoveling when I was a kid.
How did you meet your wife?
It was a blind date in Provo. She was introduced to me by one of my roommates. And we spent 44 years married, and I've been divorced now for almost 2 years. I think September the 10th. This year will be the 2-year anniversary. Have 6 children, 27 beautiful grandchildren, and
tell me about your children.
Well, I have one that lives in Alaska. They've been up there 13 years now. I have another that is still in southeastern Idaho, Pocatello. He's a travel agent. Have a son that heads the commercial division of Vivint Solar. Have 2 sons that work in the real estate business, one in Salt Lake City, one in Columbus, Ohio. They both work for the same company. And then I have a daughter here in St. George who is married to a gentleman that is a computer programmer. I've been very successful in that.
Now you say you worked in the financial
Services industry.
Okay, were you CFO, controller, comptroller?
No, actually it was the insurance industry, the securities industry. I got a securities license in 1972. Gave it up 7 years ago because I had lost confidence in the stock market, had seen all of the ups and downs and the crashes, and so I went to a kind of a platform where we work with people on a basis where they can go forward, but they can never go back. You know, Will Rogers, I think it was Will Rogers, it might have been Mark Twain that once said, I'm more concerned about a return of my money than a return on my money.
Could have been either one of them. They were twins.
Oh, they were twins.
Well, in the way they thought. Great philosophers.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom.
Yep. I met you at Rotary. Tell me about your role in Rotary.
Rotary, I believe, is a tremendous organization. I became a Rotarian in 1981 in Pocatello, Idaho. Was in the club there for a number of years. Our son served a year as a foreign exchange student for Rotary. Was a tremendous program. I've had some dear friends that have also been heavily involved in Rotary, and moved to St. George and traveled a lot, and so it wasn't really probably until 2 years ago that I got associated with Rotary and joined the St. George Rotary Club. But as an organization, as an international organization, I think the good that they do worldwide is hard to measure. And I had an experience in my life about, I think 8 years ago, that sent me in a different direction that really ties very closely into the ideal of Rotary and what Rotary is all about, and that is service above self.
So what was this that happened to you? How did you?
Well, I read a book by a gentleman who lives in Simi Valley, California, Bruce Wright. It's called The Right Exit Strategy. And in that book, he talks about each of us in our life creating what he calls a perfect calendar, and saying, if money were not an object, how would you spend your time, your talents, your resources? What would you do? What would your purpose be? And we used to do seminars on this, and if a gentleman was a golfer, he'd say, you know, that's easy. I'll just play golf in the morning, come home, have lunch, play golf in the afternoon. If it's daylight savings, you know, maybe get in the third round in the day. But you have to ask yourself, how long could you do that without saying, there has got to be something more to life than just playing golf 3 times a day? So he talked about that in the first part of his book, and on the monetary side, he said, you need to evaluate why you're working, and when you have enough to live your perfect calendar, why are you still working? Why are you not living your perfect calendar? But then the thing that hit me very strongly in the second part of that book, he said, if we want to find happiness in this life, we've got to be involved in things that are about more than money. We've got to be involved in giving back. And I was an avid BYU fan. I was probably addicted. Every year that they played the Holiday Bowl in San Diego, we were there. And from the Miracle Bowl in 1980 on, I got very upset if BYU lost. But after reading Bruce Wright's book and evaluating some things in my life, I gave up 50-yard line seats that we have in the new stadium that we had donated $5,000 for on the BYU campus. I gave up golf. And my first humanitarian project was with an organization called Thousand Smiles, which is part of Rotary International. They have a beautiful clinic in Ensenada, Mexico, and so they go down twice a year, and you have maxillofacial surgeons come in from around the world, and they do cleft palate work. And I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jeff Moses, and really liked conversations that we had. He invited me to come down and work with them. And I'm not a dentist, certainly not a maxillofacial surgeon, so I provided a lot of the support. But the families, when we brought them in to have the cleft palate work done on their children, we would feed them for the day, we'd have activities, and so we would hand out education kits, we would hand out hygiene kits and do things to accommodate the family. And I remember very early on a very moving experience, because there was a 10-year-old girl who lived in Mazatlan, Mexico, and she had brought her 4-year-old sister on the bus all the way from Mazatlan to Ensenada so that she could have the maxillofacial work done. And that kind of hooked me. A short time after that, I read an article in the Daily Herald, which was the paper there in Provo, on a gentleman by the name of Gordon Carter. And the article talked about the scouts that had gone to Tijuana, Mexico, and spent their time doing work for a Catholic priest down there, Padre Jaime. And the article pointed out that it was not a vacation, and the kids worked very hard. And this gentleman's name was Gordon Carter, and Gordon was from Twin Falls, Idaho, and I didn't know him when we lived in Idaho, but got to know Gordon very well and started working with the Heart Walk Foundation. Charity Anywhere Foundation. Heart Walk Foundation came later, and have been working with them now probably for about 6 years. We do work in 14 countries. We do a lot of work in Ecuador, where we run 5 medical and dental clinics, plus one in Tena, which is at the headwaters of the Amazon, for the Ecuadorian government. And we have a gentleman down there that runs that. We work in Peru. We do a lot of work in Tijuana. We have a group of students from Utah State University that makes about 4 trips a year down to Tijuana to do humanitarian work. These kids pay all of their own expenses. They receive no income. And
they raise their own money for?
They raise their own money.
What is the age group?
Well, this group at Utah State are college students, because they have a chapter of Charity Anywhere. This year, for example, in May, we went to Peru with 3 dentists from the East Coast, and there was a group of about 27 of us, and we provided a lot of the support. But for 4 days, we did work in the high villages of the Andes, and did probably close to 400 to 500 dental procedures during that time. Then in June, going back to Rotary a little bit, and how I feel all of this really ties together, Lane, is in Puerto Penasco, Mexico, Rocky Point, which sits right on the Sea of Cortez, about 3.5 hours southwest of Phoenix. In fact, they call it Phoenix's Beach. You have an interesting dynamic, because along the beautiful beaches there, the Sea of Cortez, you've got 5-star resorts, very plush accommodation, and yet you can go 2 blocks away and the people are living in abject poverty. But the Rotary District 5420 did something very unusual this year. Last year in Logan, for their annual district conference, they had 150 people. Well, in Rocky Point that week, we had 750 people, Rotarians, their family members, and we did 52 projects in 4 days, including 100 college-age Rotaract who built 3 houses from the ground up. And
in how many days?
4 days.
3 houses from the
3 houses from the ground up. Now, that is working in conjunction with an organization called Family Helping Families, who have now built over 60 homes in Puerto Penasco. They have a process similar, I guess, to Habitat for Humanity, where the families go through a selection process, and one of the criteria in that selection process is that they have to be involved in the building of previous homes. They, in other words, have to have skin in the game. So when we went down in June, we took 4 houses that had pretty well been finished, and we had groups of people that went in and furnished them very nicely and got them ready. And so the last Friday that we were there, we presented those 4 homes to families. And I remember one family, a single mother with 2 children, 2 girls, and one of the girls was blind. But Families Helping Families was kind of started 10 years ago because 2 gentlemen that loved Rocky Point so well went down, and I think they said about the 2nd year they looked at each other and said, you know, we love coming down here, but we can't just spend all of our time laying here on the ocean.
So they're down there on vacation, and they decided to do something about it.
They decided to do something. And Forbes wrote a nice article on it, and it was entitled 8 Things That May Have You Rethink How You Spend Your Vacation. Because, for example, Richard Isom in our club, he took his entire family down there, and for the whole week, for everything, he spent $2,000, his food, his lodging, his registration for the meetings. And my grandchildren know that Grandpa's probably not going to take them to Disneyland or SeaWorld. And for me...
Are they okay with that?
They're getting better with it. But this summer I had 2 of my granddaughters, my oldest granddaughters, down there with me. And one of my granddaughters, Katie, had gone to Guatemala with me year before last, and we had a wonderful experience. But she came down with me in June when we had the 750 people there from Rotary. And then I took another private family foundation, the Connie Jensen, the Dennis Jensen Family Foundation out of Orem, Utah. I took them down August the 8th to the 15th. There were 22 of us, 14 in their family, and there were 8 of us that were kind of helping them. But my granddaughter, who had just gotten married, her and her new husband went back down with us. So I think they're starting to see, because the format that we use down there, the kids love it. They work a half a day. The rest of the day they can play on the beach, do whatever they want, stay up as late as they want, as long as they know that at 8 o'clock the next morning they're going to be ready to go to work.
What a fantastic training program for children.
Well, you saw Youth Link yesterday, and maybe I'm naive, but I really have to feel, Lane, that if some of these children going through their formative years at a very early point can have an experience in a third world country, be it Guatemala, Mexico, or Peru, where the people have so little and yet are still happy, I think it can make a difference in their life. And we're often asked, also work with Heart Walk Foundation, a foundation right here in St. George. Tim and Penelope Eicher started it about 10 years ago, and they do a lot of work with the indigenous Caro Indians up in the high villages of the Andes. and they kind of adopted them when the government and the rest of the population there in Peru was trying to forget about them, and they've done some amazing work in the past 10 years in Peru, and I've had the opportunity to go down there 3 times. So it's something that I thoroughly enjoy doing. I feel as we all kind of try and find out what our sole purpose is or why we were placed here on this earth, I feel that part of mine is to be involved in a way that I can continually be giving back.
Well, I don't remember a lot of scripture from the Bible, but one of my favorite ones is, "Charity covereth a multitude of sins." And there's a great American philosopher that once said, and you'll recognize his name when I tell you, he said, "Anything you have more than you need is just showing off." Do you know who that great American philosopher was?
Could have been Wayne Dyer.
Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
He was sitting on the bench talking to the woman.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The famous line from that movie is, "Life is like a box of chocolates." But my favorite line is where he says, "I've determined that anything you have more than you need is just showing off." So, well, that's fantastic. Great story. Charity covereth a multitude of sins. So there's another reason to do charity work. But tell me, we have a big question politically today about immigration. And this work you're doing is in South America?
South America and Mexico.
Right. What can we do better? Do you have any ideas about how we can do immigration better? Got any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, we're often asked, because we do a lot of work in Mexico, right, provide a lot of service in Mexico.
That's why I asked you.
And I think we separate the two. I think we separate the people that we're working with, whether it's in Puerto Penasco, whether it's in Ensenada, whether it's in Tijuana. There are legitimate needs there. These people need our help and support. I also believe that we do, as a country, need to do something to tighten up our borders. I've got a business associate who lives in Mesa, Arizona, and over the past 5 or 6 years, if we've had discussions, he's been able to share with me some of the impact of illegal immigration in the Mesa, Phoenix area, and how disruptive it has become. But I do have to say that a lot of the Hispanics that I've met, legal or illegal, here in our country, are good people. They're very, very hard workers. And the ones that we meet when we go to some of the third world countries are also very humble people. And so the question we're asked a lot is, with so much need here locally, and for example, through Rotary, I worked with Frank Yoder at Resource and Reentry, those people coming out of incarceration for several years. They asked a question, with all of the need right here, why are you going to Mexico or Peru or Guatemala? And the answer that we give them is when we take somebody to one of these third world countries and they have one of these experiences, their heart changes. And they come back to their own country and they're more willing to give service.
Right.
But I have become a little frustrated. I'm 69 years old. I started working when I was 8 years old. Started paying union dues, I think, when I was 9 years old. Have never collected unemployment. Even at the time after my mother passed away, I stood in the unemployment line and looked at it and went out, and the line was so long, within 2 days I had a job. I've never collected food stamps. And we offer so much to people here locally, And quite frankly, Lane, a lot of them don't appreciate it. They're going to take as much as you're willing to give them and basically do as little as necessary to get by. And I really struggled with that internally.
I worked for a couple of housing authorities once, and one of them was quite large. And I, as a matter of fact, designed a Section 8 checkout sheet where they went in and determined what was wrong with the apartment. Got a national award for it. And I never could figure out why people that were getting help would leave and destroy the apartment they lived in. It blew my mind. Anyway, well, that's a little off the subject, but I think I told you I interviewed Rand Paul last week.
Yes.
He is a dentist, and he's just recently gone on one of these trips down there to do volunteer work for dentist work and so forth. He's connected to some foundation in Salt Lake, and they go down and do that. I don't know what the name of the foundation was, but it's a great, great cause.
Well, with Charity Anywhere, a lot of the work we do is dental work. In this last trip to Peru, we went to Iquitos, which is at the headwaters of the Amazon, and we had a chance down there to talk to somebody from the government, and they were very open to providing assistance if we were willing to bring groups down. And something interesting, Lane, when we went up to the first high village in the Andes to start doing dental work, and most of these people had never been to a dentist in their life, and they started unloading all of the equipment. The dental chair had a big rotary symbol on it, and so I asked one of the doctors, I said, what's with that? And he said, well, several years ago we went to Rotary and we got a $10,000 grant, and so we bought this portable dental equipment, and we bought these chairs. So it seems to almost kind of go full circle as it relates to Rotary being involved in so many different things in so many countries in so many different ways, and that's why I love Rotary.
We got 1 minute left. What's your advice to young people?
Turn your life around and make service a part of it at a very, very young age. Don't think that your parents owe you an inheritance, that anybody owes you a living, that what you achieve, you need to achieve through hard work and efforts on your own, because there really is no such thing as a free lunch, even though at times I think we're trying to convince people that there is. And I would also say develop a work ethic. I don't see the work ethic today, but for me, you know, when I was growing up, if I didn't have that work ethic that was instilled in me, I wouldn't survive.
Ted, it's been great visiting with you. You have a fantastic career and a fantastic job in helping other people. This is Lane Ronnow. We've been talking to Ted Dodge. Thanks for being with us. Well, that was really nice.
Feel like it went all right?
Yeah, great. You said you graduated from high school in 1954?
64.
64?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a hearing problem. Let's take the mic off from you. I'd like to get a picture with you, if that's okay.